Welcome to See You on the Other Side, where the world of the mysterious collides with the world of entertainment. A discussion of art, music, movies, spirituality, the weird, and self-discovery. And now, your hosts, musicians and entertainers who have their own weakness for the weird, Mike and Wendy from the band Sunspot.
First Tuesday in November. You know what that means, Wendy?
I do know what that means.
That means it's Election Day here in the United States. And when you're in Madison, Wisconsin, Election Day is the only thing that people talk about. Not that they shouldn't talk about anything else.
No,
since
it's good.
It's an off year. It's not a presidential election. Some people don't know that there's an election going on. But consider this your warning. There's an election going on November 4th. And
soon.
Do with that what you will. But what?
This isn't a political show, though, Mike. So why are we talking about the elections?
Well, we're talking about the elections because I would like to talk a little bit about the aliens that rule the planet.
What?
Yeah, and chances are we're voting for some of them in this particular election.
Oh, that's not very nice, Mike.
Hey, I always, we always dreamed of a time when the future was here, and when it comes to aliens ruling the planet, the future's always been here, and we'll get there in a little bit. Starting off, let's talk about, you usually vote in the off-year elections and the off-presidential elections. Are you one of those, you vote every time?
I try to, as long as I'm able to stay on top of things and, educate myself enough to know what I'm doing when I go in. I confess there have been times when I haven't, and therefore I didn't vote. Shame on me. But yeah, sometimes I do. Try to be a good citizen.
I try to vote every time. And it doesn't matter if I know anything about the election or not.
Oh my gosh, that's horrible.
I will go in and
you just
I'll
pick a name that looks cool or what?
Good.
No.
Well, I look for names I can trust. So when I go in, it's like that guy, his name's Mike too.
Oh, that's terrible.
Right? Hey, as long as somebody's going to have their boot to my throat, I might as well have it be a Mike as well. So no, I try to vote all the time, even if I have no idea what I'm voting for. And the people I vote for never win anyway, so it doesn't matter. And that's the thing. The people I vote for never win because I don't often very much vote for incumbents. And I think, when you think about, so the mayor of Madison, so Paul Soglin, he's a nice guy. I used to work with him at a company called Epic. He's a really nice guy. But this is the third time that Paul Soglin's been mayor. So when we came here for college, Wendy, who was the mayor? Yeah, all right.
I like music.
Let me give you a hint. It was Paul Soglin.
I thought that was a trick question. I was going to say that, and then I'm like, no,
I wasn't trying to set you up for anything like that.
Gotcha.
When you first come to college, you're not even thinking about the mayor.
No. And everybody's trying to get your vote, and they're all like bribing you with free T-shirts and things. Absolutely.
And honestly, that's not that getting bribed to vote is not a recent kind of thing. So Madison Ghost Walks, which is a tour company I run, which is a haunted history tour of the Capitol Square. One of the stops there, we talk about this bar that in the 1860s and 1870s, they used to have all of the big political rallies at this bar that was on the Capitol Square in Madison. And the big thing about political rallies, people came out because there was free liquor. And that was the thing.
Well, that's completely different. Free liquor is different from a free T-shirt.
Right, free liquor, that's a reason to vote for somebody.
You had me at free liquor.
Right, check. What do I got to do? I got to show my ID? No, but that So it's not weird to bribe people for votes. They've been doing it for centuries, and they do it now with T-shirt. And at least they had a good time back in the 19th century. Now we just get crap, like a button or something like that,
right?
Or like an "I voted" sticker or whatever. Nobody gives you a shot when you fill in your little line at the booth. But so that that's nothing new. But what I was going to say is, Paul Soglin has been mayor of Madison in 3 different decades.
A long
Not that he's
time.
not a good mayor, not that he hasn't done a good job. I mean, I don't know. But what I'm saying is, it's kind of like, to me, as someone who came to Madison, he was the mayor. With the time I spend in Madison now, he's the mayor.
He's just always the mayor.
Right. Exactly.
He was before we were alive. He will be after we're alive.
You watch that movie, The War at Home, about the Vietnam War and the protests in Madison in the 1970s. Paul Soglin's the mayor.
Oh my gosh.
In the movie from the 70s, and then in college in the 90s, and then in the 2010s.
So the alien thing is starting to make a little more sense.
Well, incumbents, they just seem to always win. And that's interesting. So it's a 98% incumbency rate, that if you're elected, chances are you're going to stay elected. I mean, that's why we created, during World War II, FDR won 4 terms.
Yeah.
And that's why they created the whole only 2 terms you can be president, so that somebody wouldn't become a dictator for life.
Right.
Which, if you're just coming off a guy that was the president for 16 years, or not 16, because obviously he died, but that's a thing to think about. So, voting, sometimes it feels that, does your vote even matter? When you do that, when you talked about you try to vote when you're educated. Wendy, I respect you. I respect you for doing that. I really do, because you're like, well, I'd like to know about the issues before I go in. Instead of me, where I'm like, hey, how can I vote for Mickey? How can Mickey Mouse become, I wouldn't vote for Mickey Mouse, because I was never a big Disney, I was more of a Bugs Bunny guy. So I would obviously vote for Bugs Bunny over Mickey Mouse. But, something's up, that it's this incumbency rate. And that gets you to think, so the United States is not a democracy. It's a republic, which means we have elected officials, that we represent, that represent us. And we elect officials. Like if it was a democracy, we would make decisions. Like they would have polls for every single decision that happened, every single law. And instead, it's a republic, so we elect people to make those decisions for us. But there was a poll that came out last year, and they had studied opinion polls from the 1940s until today. Now that the opinion poll infrastructure, and then they studied Congress and the laws that were passed and everything, and they compared the polls of the people to the laws that Congress had passed. And Congress had passed laws that the people did not support, according to the opinion polls, 80% of the time.
That's scary.
Right. It's totally scary, because it's like, well, what does our vote mean if the people that elected to represent us
aren't doing what we want them to?
Exactly. And so, and in 1996, less than 50% of the electorate, they didn't even went to the polls. So it's not even 50% of the people who are doing the voting. So it's really, when you think about it, these guys are in office forever. Not these guys and girls, are in office forever. You have elections decided by less than 50% of the population. And so that's why I say, what does it really mean when somebody's like, oh, you're not going to vote for one of my guys or one of the top 2 people? You're going to waste your vote. And I'm like, hey, buddy, Congress isn't even going to do what you think. So waste your vote. I think you just did. And that's the thing. And also, a lot of politicians are extraordinarily wealthy. So you remember who Russ Feingold was, Wendy?
But of course.
Yes, Russ Feingold,
Wisconsin politician.
Wisconsin senator. One time when I visited Washington, D.C., my mother and I went into the Capitol, and we went to go see what the Senate was up to. Because you can just go in, hey, what's the Senate up to? Well, Russ Feingold was the president of the Senate that day because there wasn't much going on. And he was kind of hanging in there with his like feet up and stuff. And I'm like, Russ is the president of the Senate today, on Wisconsin, right? Forward, go Badgers. But what I want to say about Russ Feingold is that he was the senator with the least amount of money.
Right. Yeah.
And he still had a net worth, he
was not like poor.
Right. It's not like Russ Feingold came off the street and was, he was a lawyer. He's obviously Ivy League educated, and he's not a poor guy. And he was the poorest member of the Senate. So you have a certain class of politician that is in office forever and has a ton of money. So what that sounds to me as if they might be aliens.
I was wondering where this was going, because I'm like, Mike, are you going to make an announcement? Are you running for office? But now I see. Now it's getting into our territory of discussion.
Right. The kind of people that would vote for me are the kind of people who would write in Bugs Bunny on the thing. So I would say I would never run for office.
Or maybe other dudes named Mike would vote for you.
That's true. Hey, they take the Mike Huberty way of voting and be like, cool name, dude. Check. Well, that's the thing. It seems like that there might be a ruling class of people over the rest of us.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And have you ever seen the movie They Live, Wendy?
I don't believe I have, actually.
Well,
maybe though.
They Live was a movie all about aliens from who had come to planet Earth, and they were disguised as regular people, but they would put secret subliminal messages in signs, in our money, and you could only see the aliens and the subliminal messages if you had special glasses.
Oh, that's cool.
So
that's awesome.
If you put on the special glasses, you could see the aliens around you.
Oh, and then that's also, sweet.
If you looked at the signs, you would see. Like you look at a piece of money and it would say things like, "This is your God," and you'd look at a sign of like a sexy woman or a billboard or something, and it would be like, "Obey," reproduce, obey,
yeah, and
all these different things. And now that movie came out in the 1980s, and it's a classic. And we in the Sunspot video for 2012. We actually use a little bit of footage from They Live it's inspired.
Okay. And for the uninitiated, Sunspot is a rock band that Mike and I are in.
And
just in case you didn't know,
we took a little inspiration from They Live for one of our songs and videos. We can link to that in the show notes.
Yes, absolutely.
But so there's a English guy by the name of David Icke.
Icke?
Yeah. Well, Icke.
Oh, okay.
And I don't know if he's not actually, he might not be icky as a person, but he certainly is icky as a surname. But so he's this English guy, and he was a soccer player in the 70s. Obviously, football everywhere else in the world, soccer in the U.S. In the 1980s, he was a BBC television personality. Just like like think about Ryan Seacrest, or maybe Ryan Seacrest was never a professional sportman. Terry Bradshaw or something like that. Somebody who's a Fran Tarkenton, a professional sports guy that eventually is on TV and does stuff. And then he joined the UK Green Party and became a leader in the Green Party in the late 80s. But right around the early 1990s, he completely changed his tune and pretty much went off the deep end. So he was a person that people were like, oh yeah, it's kind of like if Fran Tarkenton released a book that said the president of the United States is an alien. It's an ancient alien race that has come here to subjugate us and steal our gold.
Okay.
Yeah, so is
that weird?
I don't think so.
But yeah, to go from one of the politicians to actually like decrying him to that extent.
Right, to say like, these guys are a ruling class. They all seem to go to the same universities. They all seem to belong to the same, organizations. In the pre-show, we were talking a little bit about it, and we were discussing, the ruling class. George Bush, John Kerry, they're in the same skull and bones fraternity.
Yeah, when I first heard about that, I was like, what? Secret society? What is this?
Yeah. Right, secret society, and it may have just been some kind of fraternal organization or something like that at this university at Yale.
It's still weird, though.
These guys were in the same one. Are they really
right? And they're supposed to be so different.
Are they really cut from different cloths? Well, David Icke doesn't just think they're not cut from different cloths. He doesn't think they're human.
Yeah.
And he goes back,
wow.
and he goes all the when I say he goes back, he goes all the way back to the Mesopotamians. All right. So he's going back to the cradle of civilization. And he says that these reptilians, the reptilian aliens that rule the world are the Annunaki. And that was originally the name for the gods of the Mesopotamians.
Okay.
Anu was the sky god. Ki was the earth god. And the Anunnaki were their children.
Aha.
And so the Anunnaki came to Earth from the constellation Draco, which, okay, that seems a little bit too on the nose to me because, Draco also means dragon. So saying that the reptilians come from the constellation Draco sounds like a Star Trek writer was just really lazy.
Yeah.
He's like, we should just make him come from the place called Dragon. Yeah, I think that's a fun idea. Like the kids will like it. They lived in tunnels and caverns inside the earth and were hungry for something called monatomic gold. So it's monatomic spelled like it should mean one atom. And I'm not really sure what gold made of one atom. Wendy, and anything in your science background, have you heard of the gold made of one atom?
I can't say I have. I don't know.
Yeah.
I was just trying to think of what, types of food that somebody living in a tunnel and cavern, all I could think of was like Yukon Gold potatoes.
Okay.
I don't know.
So the Anunnaki came to Earth interested in Yukon Gold potatoes.
But
right.
But it's interesting because when you first started talking about the lizards and aliens and whatnot, it just, of course, immediately made me think of V. But, obviously that was a little different thing because they're coming down from the sky and whatnot. And that particular...
I liked it. And you know what? I completely didn't think of V. I was like the biggest fan of V. And I don't know why I didn't think of V because it was reptilians hidden inside of people.
Yeah. And that's what I was thinking of. And I'm like, maybe this guy was just really inspired by that series.
Yeah, sure. He's like, man, I really love V. I'm gonna it's true. And I'm going to make a whole conspiracy theory about it. Okay, that's enough. We don't have to have a bad British accent
yeah,
today.
That's good effort though.
Sure. Okay, but he says that monatomic gold is a mineral that can increase the carrying capacity of the nervous system 10,000-fold. So you know how people say we only use 10% of our brains? Most of my friends like 2%. He's saying that, it can make them super intelligent. And after ingesting it, these reptilian aliens can process vast amounts of information. They can speed up their trans-dimensional travel, which is, I guess, how they got here in the first place. Maybe like a wormhole or something. They just popped into a different dimension where things are closer together.
Yeah,
popped
sure.
out here.
Why not? I mean, if they're that if they're that smart, then they could probably figure that stuff out.
Yeah,
fairly easily.
You know what? We're talking about reptiles who are hidden as human beings. I feel like this is a little bit of dramatic license we can give a brother.
Yeah, I'm following him so far. I'm on board.
And monatomic gold is also what helps them shapeshift from reptilian to human form.
The most terrifying part of the
right,
the monatomic gold.
And they feed on aggression.
Oh.
And because they feed on aggression, that's why we have war. Because who is usually the ones who send people to war?
Yeah.
The people in charge, the ruling class, the Annunaki. So they are the global elite. And he goes into, some good detail about who is actually a lizard.
How does he know?
Well, he was a soccer player, and they're pretty smart.
Maybe he took a nibble of some of the monatomic gold.
Monatomic gold. Like maybe he just found some or whatever. He's like, wonder what this tastes like. Hey, it's
By
lizards.
Jove, everyone's lizards.
It's bloody lizards. Run for your lives. No, but that would be. But the monatomic, maybe he had a bite of that, or maybe he's got the glasses from They Live.
That's possible. But really, though, okay, so he somehow figured out, he cracked the code of who is a lizard.
Yep. And pretty much every president was a lizard. So he goes into it. He's like, well, at least 43 American presidents. Well, what do we have? Like 45 presidents or 44 of them? Like that's everybody.
Yeah, who's excluded? I'd like to know.
I don't know. Maybe it was a guy like McKinley or something
James K.
like
Polk.
that. Yeah, whoever was president for a month.
Oh.
Like that guy. No, that guy wasn't a lizard. That's why he got killed right away. And so he talks about the top level of the lizard people. He calls them the red dresses. And so in a book, he said that it's reptilian software. And the red dresses are the highest level of the brotherhood, the Babylonian brotherhood of lizards. And they are the carriers of the software. Calls it reptilian software. He calls it constructs of mind. They lack consciousness and free will, and their human bodies are holographic veils. So that sounds like maybe they don't shapeshift, but they have a holographic veil. And that gets complicated too, though, because like, how are they... what are they wearing? That's what I always think. Where you see in a movie or something like that, where somebody's like, "Oh, I can disguise myself." Or I just watched the new X-Men movie the other day, and Mystique, the X-Man, the X-Woman, when she's doing something, like she's always able to perfectly, like not just replicate the person, but also replicate their clothes. And I always think that's a conceit. That's not really, Like, do you replicate the fabric? Is it the clothes? And, like, so if you pulled on a shirt, would you be pulling on their skin?
Right.
So sometimes it makes me feel like these people haven't thought everything all the way through.
The details.
Yeah, so the holographic veil. Like, can you touch if you touch the holographic veil, are you really touching lizard skin underneath?
I see what you're saying.
Right. So it's like, hey, like you pat somebody, like also the House of Windsor. So all of the
I was
British
wondering. Okay,
royal
so
family.
Not just Americans.
No, the Anunnaki are all over the world, but the House of Windsor and the British royal family, I mean, they are right in there. Those guys are lizards to the bone. And well, the thing is, like, if you pat Prince Charles on the back, like, is it like, oh,
slimy?
You're scaly, and he's like, oh, pat me on the back. And so that's sometimes I'm like, well, I don't know really what you're talking about. But there's another group called the sheeple.
Okay.
And we are the sheeple.
Of course we are.
And I don't know if he actually made up I don't know who made up the term sheeple.
Yeah.
It sounds like, I think that hippies have been using that.
I was going to say,
forever.
I bet a bunch of people have made up that term.
Right. And then that's most of us. And we're conscious, but we do what we're told, and we're their source of energy. They feed on aggression. They feed on our energy. And so we are kind of their, well, sheeple.
Kind of like the Matrix.
Yeah, right.
Bit.
Humans are batteries. Yeah, I think that's totally like the Matrix. And so also there are certain sheeple who are repeaters. And there's doctors, teachers, journalists, and those kind of like people in the media, people who are they're not exactly in charge. So there's the ruling elite, the guys are Paul Soglin, and there's the people underneath.
So do the repeaters know that they're repeaters, or are they like actually just sheeple like humans who think they're just doing their normal job, but they're actually broadcasting the message?
The repeaters are sheeple. They're people who are pretty much doing their job.
So they're unaware that they're being controlled by lizards.
The red dresses, that's right.
Okay.
And so the doctors repeat what they're told in medical schools, and then whatever the big pharma, the drug companies tell them. Teachers talk about the things that they learned in the educational and academia. And journalists, journalists now, they'll do whatever takes clicks, right? A journalist will be like, hey, we've all read BuzzFeed. We've all been in that click dungeon.
You'll never believe what this person did next.
Right. And then I always check it out and I totally believe it. And it's stupid. And then I feel like a jerk. And
then you hide it from your feed forever.
Right. Well, you're the smart one. Like I still look at a BuzzFeed or whatever. Or like what gets me are those lists. It's always like 10 things you didn't know about Pulp Fiction. I'm like, I didn't know anything about Pulp Fiction. I'll have to read that. And then I do, and it's all stuff I already know about Pulp Fiction. I'm like, that's not fair. Or the 10 worst, dresses at the Oscars. And stuff. Lists always get me every time. I'm like, oh, I'd like a list. And those websites aren't even good. Okay, beyond that.
But the repeaters are like presumably journalists like from a higher level, not just like the BuzzFeed like that.
Right. You would say that's it. A lot of the big repeaters would be the people who are in charge of the media.
Okay, gotcha.
The ones who decide
choosing the programming and
the things that we talk about. And that's a really good point too, in that when we talk about elections and you were saying that you try to stay on top of things. And how do you stay on top of things?
Well, that's the thing is it's more so that I right. I don't stay on top of things. And when I try to not vote when I'm not fully aware of what I'm voting for, So I'm not like, because when you said you stay on top of things, that made it sound like I'm a big like political, like I know what's going on. Whereas, that's often not the case.
No, and that's okay.
But if I did want to learn about somebody, I'd probably, it's a good question because how do you know what to trust? There's so much. There's
crap.
Yeah, exactly.
So you'd probably go to the newspaper, you'd go to a magazine, you'd go to different websites to learn opinions about things, and then you would try to form an opinion yourself. But the repeaters are in charge of that media. So you are learning.
The only information available to you is subject to their control.
That's right. So not only do they control what people are doing, and then with the laws and with the police force, they also control the sheeple through controlling the conversation. Because you'll see it in an office or just when you're trying to make small talk with somebody. People will often just repeat the first thing they read in the newspaper.
Right.
This month it happens to be Ebola. That somebody's like, "Hey, did you hear about the Ebola?" And I'm like, "Hear about it? I got it." I'm just kidding. I don't have Ebola.
Where's the rim shot sound effect? We have to get that.
No blood from my eyes today. But yeah, so that's the different classes of people who make up this illusion of the world that, according to David Icke, is broadcast from the planet Saturn and it's amplified by the moon. So I guess Saturn's got a really good TV station or whatever, a really good antenna, and then but it needs like an antenna amp in the by the moon, which
that makes a lot. I mean, yeah, sure, why not?
Right, we're already going there, so that's distributing the software. And then the final group, those who see through the illusion. They're often regarded as dangerous or mad, and they possess a consciousness that is trying to rewrite the software that the Annunaki is programming our heads with.
Yeah, and that's the scariest part because then no one's really able to bring clarity to the sheeple because they'll be seen as insane.
Right, if you have a network of computers and they're all running like Windows 8 or Windows 7 or something like that. And then one of the computers is running like Windows XP and they can't talk to each other. You know, you're like, hey man, we have to upgrade this Windows XP to Windows 8 or they're not going to be able to speak.
Right.
So I see a software analogy and I know it all sounds crazy. What do you think it sounds crazy? Do you think this sounds reasonable?
Well, it's just a different perspective of things, right? I mean, maybe there's not a lot of scientific backing of it, but I mean, just like a lot of other things that people believe or claim, I mean, it's a little out there. It is, I admit, it's a little out there, but you try to keep an open mind because who knows? I mean, what if he's right?
People believe in crazier things than this. And the idea that maybe what he's writing is, you know, Andy Kaufman-esque in the way that this is all a satire. And he has gone in and he's created this narrative of the Annunaki and the queen as a lizard and all these things to represent something. Because if this wasn't a conspiracy theory, but it was just a satirical book, when you talk about the ruling class and the ruling elite and the wealthy exploiting the common person, would this be that far off? You know, that's the question.
Right. Like is he just making a big demonstration by, you know?
Right. Are they real reptiles or are they just born into privilege? You know?
Yeah.
Are,
a different kind of privilege.
So we all studied, I mean, a lot of us studied A Modest Proposal by Jonathan Swift. Jonathan Swift is the guy that wrote Gulliver's Travels. And he wrote A Modest Proposal where he was talking about eating Irish children. And did anybody actually think that Jonathan Swift was like, we should probably, you know, he's like, you know, he's right. They are a great source of protein. And so I don't think that, you know, the idea that as a satire, it would be very far off. A wealthy ruling class that believes itself to be better than the normal population, and then another class that consistently pursues its own interests while the rest of society struggles. And so David Icke might have a lot of weird ideas, and he might be one of those people who can rewrite the software.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I don't know if the things that David Icke is saying is that different than what the Occupy movement might have said, or, you know, anything like that, where you talk about a wealthy elite that seems to have control over the rest of the population. So,
well, one thing I was just thinking about real quick here is that, you know, by podcasting, we are kind of being the media. So by exposing this and giving it more attention, we might be, how should I say, rewritten.
Absolutely. Like we're the next people. Like next time we're like, I hope you voted for one of the incumbents.
If the episode either disappears or the podcast gets terminated unexpectedly. Sorry, guys, we tried.
Yep. Or you see us next time, and then we're all like, you know, that lizard stuff. That's crazy.
Oh man,
how stupid and dumb!
What a silly man.
David Icke's a madman. You'll know exactly what happened to us.
Dun dun dun.
So anyway, when you hit that election booth on November 4th, just think lizard versus lizard. Whichever one you like better, take your pick. How about some music?
All right. Check out the show notes for today's episode at othersidepodcast.com/3.
Here's our song for Election Day, a track about the owners and the owned. Hottie Illuminati.
And you
Thank you for listening to today's episode. You can find us online at OthersidePodcast.com. Until next time, see you on the other side.